Good afternoon, everyone. While we are currently all in different locations, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we live and work. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to any elders who may be joining us today. I am Ruth Gormley. I lead the strategic marketing team at Creative Victoria, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. I want to welcome you all to this third Recovery Roadmap webinar, Communication in COVID and Beyond with Nerida Webster. Creative Victoria is really enjoying working with ArtsHub on presenting these webinars as part of our Creative Exchange program. We hope you're finding them useful and interesting. On the housekeeping front, this webinar is being live captioned. If you want to see the captions, just follow the link in the chat. You will need to be using Google Chrome. We are also recording this session, meaning any questions you ask will be on record. The recorded webinar will be available through ArtsHub and the Creative Exchange page on the Creative Victoria website. We'll be sending out a survey following the webinar, so please fill that in to let us know how we've gone and what you would like to see covered in future. I'm not sure if Richard Watts is here yet. ArtsHub, are you able to let us know what's happening now? I think I'm supposed to fill the dead air for a moment or two, which is awkward because I don't have a great deal more to say. Nerida is the head of marketing and comms for, and Nerida will give you her title, at State Library Victoria. And oh, I see Richard. I have muttered enough. I'll pass over to Richard Watts. Have a lovely time. Enjoy the session.
Hi there, everybody. Very interesting that we're having technical difficulties because it's one of the things I'm going to talk about when we're talking about communicating during COVID. And one of the things I say is that audiences are very generous, and the tolerance of dealing with technical issues while we're going through these things is, we've seen it to be quite high. Although I believe Richard's back, so if you do want to jump in, Richard, before I kick off, please do. While I bring up my presentation, and then we'll see if you want to jump in. Okay, well, I might just kick straight off and hopefully you can see my presentation. So I've been asked here to talk to you about communication in COVID and beyond and engaging with audiences, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you about some of the things we've been doing at State Library Victoria. I'm the head of brand and audience development there, which I think Ruth is just a fancy way of saying head of marketing and comms. So my wonderful team lead the library's marketing, corporate communications, public relations, media, social media, website, and kind of everything that goes with that. So we've been pretty critical to people continuing to connect with the library during COVID when the library's actually closed. Before I talk to you about what we've been doing during COVID, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context around what we were experiencing leading up to COVID. Some of you probably know that the library was going through a major redevelopment in the years leading up to COVID. It was actually a 5-year project that was $90 million. And it was really all about transforming the physical building of the library. That's something we've been talking to our audiences about for 5 years. We've raised $30 million on the promise of this physical transformation. And in December last year, we reopened all of our new spaces with the exception of one. So that was our grand opening, and we were going into 2020 talking about the extraordinary spaces that people could now experience at the library. We had a major marketing campaign in market, telling people, come to the library. You can see on the screen some of the creative from that campaign, which was all about new spaces now open, just add curiosity. And we were seeing 7,000 visitors a day through our doors, which was quite astronomical at a time that's actually traditionally a quieter time of the year in January. And that's up from around 5,000 that we would normally see before we transform these spaces. The final space that we opened was called Start Space, which is a dedicated co-working collaborative space for early stage entrepreneurs. And we opened that space on Friday, the 13th of March, and 3 days later, the library closed because of COVID. So that might be a lesson in launching things on the 13th, Friday the 13th. So COVID hits, what did we do? One of the first things that we did was really ask our audiences, what did they want from us? It was already a really crowded digital space. People's inboxes and news feeds were really being bombarded by programming and content and workshops and tasks. And we wanted to make sure that what we were delivering was relevant and responsive to our audiences. So, we put something out through our newsletters, we created an online form on our website, but equally you could do something like use the SurveyMonkey platform. You could even just do a poll on social media. It's really low cost or no cost, but incredibly powerful to just ask audiences what they want, what they need, what they expect. I can't emphasize the power of that enough. What we heard was really interesting. Audiences, and I guess shouldn't have been surprising, but, it was really about our core services. They wanted things that they could only get from the library. They couldn't get anywhere else. So it was about access to our collections, access to our librarians, support for research, support for family history. So very early on, the first thing we were focused on is how do we increase that access and make it much easier for people to become a library member and engage with our collections. So we did things like simplified that sign-up process. We made it so that people could get immediate access to collections, which seems sort of hard to believe now, but before COVID, it wasn't an immediate activation of membership. We negotiated with vendors, third-party vendors that we have relationships with to supply databases, things like Ancestry.com, which previously you could only access for free from inside the library building. But now our library members during COVID are able to access that for free from home. We also negotiated things like increasing our e-bookshelf offering. And again, that's with a third-party vendor we have a partnership with, and they increased our ebook offering from, I think, about 20,000 to 200,000 ebooks available. And that's been hugely popular. We've also now recently just introduced a live chat with our librarians, so people can chat with our librarians real time. And I think some of these things, were absolutely in the pipeline, but COVID has made us very quickly, rapidly bring these to market now. The other thing we did was we increased the frequency of our communications with our audiences. So our monthly newsletter became weekly under the umbrella of Library in Your Lounge, and we drove the message of keep exploring the world, keep exploring our collections, stay connected. We did that across all of our touch points. Our newsletters for our Friends of the Library, which is our paid membership program, also increased from quarterly to weekly using the same weekly newsletter we had, but every month there would be exclusive content in there for friends only, and exclusive online talks for our friends membership base as well. We also introduced videos from our CEO each week in our newsletter, which was a little intro around what they can expect from the library this week. And that's really Kate at home, Kate Tawney, our CEO, filming that on her iPhone in her lounge room or from her backyard. And it's really added a personalised connection with our audiences. So you don't need to have fancy editing or technology or video producers to really create authentic content that really connects with audiences. And we found that again has really resonated, and people are viewing that when they open our newsletters. We are also really lucky to have a resource on staff that is a video producer. So we've able to also create a huge amount of content that actually takes audiences back into the library at a time when they can't access the library. So, we've been creating 2 to 3 minute videos that really take people behind the scenes, but also show kind of gems of the library and things that are sort of hidden in plain sight. Things like, you may have seen some of these, but the furniture in the library's dome, that people would walk past every day, but that's actually the original furniture. So having a little story about that in our channels is really valuable. And I've put on the screen there, you can see some feedback from an audience member that has contacted us to tell us what they're getting out of what we're sharing. And I really just, that bottom sentence that says, though I visited the library in the days when that was possible and joined a library tour, these are offering so much more. So it's actually presented an opportunity for us to kind of engage in a different way with our audiences. And the feedback we're getting is that it is absolutely resonating at the moment. Again, though, even if you don't have access to a video producer who's got, amazing equipment, a mobile phone and a great story is just as powerful. So I would encourage you, absolutely, if the story is engaging, the polish, especially in a time of COVID, is not the expectation of audiences necessarily at the moment, and especially in platforms like social media. Our programming team obviously also have been very focused on creating and delivering programs, and they've done this quite rapidly, trying to see what resonates, what works, and adapting as they go. Again, as I said at the beginning, I think audience expectations around production quality have been quite generous, and the world over, we've got kind of high-profile journalists and actors and authors and musicians sitting in their lounge room or their kitchen and connecting with audiences. And there's been a real charm to that. And I think, again, it sort of reinforces that feeling that we are actually all in this together. And so I think, again, don't be afraid to try things. So we've had our family programmers out telling stories and singing songs to our children audiences from their lounge room. We've had our librarians producing content and telling stories through a YouTube video series we've produced called Ask a Librarian. And that Ask a Librarian series is one of our most popular content pieces, and it's being produced by the librarians themselves using the technology that they feel most comfortable with. So some of those people are using, some of them are using Zoom and recording themselves talking to camera and sharing their screen. Some are using PowerPoint and doing a voiceover and recording that. Some are using iMovie. So, there's varying outputs that are coming. But it's really about what they're confident in using. And what we're seeing, again, is it doesn't matter if it's not highly polished or edited as professionally as perhaps we were doing before COVID. Again, it's about creating content that's engaging for the audience. You can check them out on YouTube, and I think there is a link to our YouTube channel in the chat if you want to go and have a look there. And really, again, it goes back to the fact about what is the content that our audiences want from us that's relevant, and it's about what's unique to the library. So that's what we've been really focused on creating and pushing out. So the other thing I just wanted to briefly touch on is, the library also has obviously a critical role to play in collecting. We're a collecting institution so that, future generations can look at the way we lived and, things that went on today and the kinds of experiences that we were having. So our collections teams have been out, documenting, collecting, literally taking photographs of playgrounds with signs closed like this one. But this was actually not taken by a librarian. This was taken by a member of the community who's contributed to something we've created, which is called Memory Bank, the Collective Isolation Project. And again, we'll pop a link to this in the chat. But what we wanted to do was to create a space for community contributions and for the community to come together, share their experiences and reflect, I guess, on what's been happening, but also to become what we've called citizen collectors. It's about how all of these contributions can be shared with the library so that our collection is richer and that the perspectives from across, the whole of Victoria and not just Melbourne and things like that are really coming through in what we're collecting. So, people are sharing lots of content in there, but we're also each week have been posing questions and prompts to help generate the sort of content we also do want to capture. So for the first week, for example, it was, take a photo of what's in your fridge, tell us what's in there, which might seem completely strange and bizarre now, but in 50 years' time, somebody looking at the contents of our fridge, it's actually really interesting and tells a story about the way we live today. We've had about over 2,000 members to that, and we're getting contributions every day. And some of it's in response to the specific questions we are asking. And some of it's just people contributing what they're doing on their walk, the things that they've been doing at home, what are the new skills they're learning. And you can go and have a look and explore some of the discussions in that forum. So just quickly, some of the things that we've achieved, we've had more than 2.7 million user sessions since we closed in March on the library's website, which is an increase of 25%. The number of people using the library's catalogue has increased by 20%. Use of our licensed databases, so things like ancestry.com, is up 172%. So if anybody's out there doing their family history, you're not alone. And our librarians have answered more than 3,500 reference and research inquiries since closure, so an increase of 65%. And we've seen an increase on our social channels of almost around 8,000. So it's been really interesting to watch the way audiences have connected and responded to what we've been creating. So what are the things that we've learned, and what does this look like moving forward? Well, I think, like many others, I'm sure it's forced us to adapt very quickly, to bring things that we were thinking about to reality in a much shorter space of time, and to test what we've been doing. And I guess in a COVID normal or a post-COVID world, there's absolutely no doubt about it, we will continue to have a digital offering, a strong digital offering, and a hybrid offering of that physical and digital experience. I guess some of the things that we'll need to explore and question and discuss over time is, what's the balance between the physical and the digital? What are we creating that's complementing experiences and not just replicating them? How do we keep listening to audiences and understanding what their needs and how are they going to change? Because I think we don't know that. We don't know how audiences are going to behave. I don't think individuals necessarily know that as we are looking at coming out of lockdown. But I think asking is always incredibly valuable. I think also looking at what other research is being done. So the Audience Outlook Monitor research by Pattern Makers, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with. Sorry. Excuse me. That is also incredibly valuable, and I think we could probably put a link into the chat there as well. But just try things, I think, is my main message, and test and listen.
Okay, speaking of listening, Nerida, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you see me?
I can. Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise for the technical drama that we had at the start of the session. For those of you who don't know me, hello, Richard Watts from ArtsHub. Everything was working perfectly half an hour ago. Nerida, to pick up on one of the points you made, you said that if a story is engaging, you don't need polish in your kind of digital and social presentations. What makes an engaging story? What can other organisations seize upon within their own kind of organisation, their own ranks, to make an engaging story at this time?
Look, I think for us, it's absolutely about, what are the things, it's not necessarily COVID that's made this an engaging story, but the things that we know resonate with our audiences is that behind the scenes, those kind of coming into an, I guess, what might feel like an exclusive or intimate experience, or how are you kind of telling a story that is surprising or interesting or quirky. And I think we're very fortunate at the library to have an incredible collection where you can kind of dive in anywhere and start to draw out some of those things. I think as well, looking at relevance and what's going on. So kind of early on, some of the first things we were bringing out were, our librarians put together pretty incredible research guides and things that kind of delve into stories in our collection. And we did one on the Spanish flu, because it was kind of this lived experience that Melbourne and Victoria have been through before, obviously in incredibly different circumstances. And that was one of the only other times the library's closed its doors was during the Spanish flu. But this has now been the longest. But I think it's about what's relevant, what kind of is going on in the external environment that makes this timely and interesting, and how are you creating that kind of narrative and also those personal potential exclusive experiences.
Can you discuss any examples you've observed of successful models of digital engagement from other organisations, especially smaller organisations, during this period?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think one of the things it's been really interesting, and I'm going to draw on my husband actually, because we've now been working in close quarters, and he works for an organisation called Support Act, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's a mental health organisation, kind of the crisis relief for the music industry. And obviously they've been incredibly impacted the music industry. And so one of the things they did very early on was quickly create a lunchtime video series, which was absolutely about, it was a Zoom call, it was talking to another professional, and it was about, God, how the hell do we deal with this? And again, that was relevant content for their audience because everybody was grappling. And so they didn't kind of plan and map that in any in-depth way. They just saw a need and used the platform and the opportunity that we've got in COVID to just kind of put it out there in this almost beta style. And that has really resonated and continued throughout COVID.
Now, earlier, some questions now that are coming in via the Q&A function. Earlier, you mentioned a crowded digital space, but nonetheless, you've increased your e-communications. How did you navigate the tension between that?
Yeah, I think, again, it really goes back to understanding what was important for our audience and what was unique to us. And I think, early on, we saw so much content being produced and so much, try this baking or do this activity. And I think one of the things when we went out and asked our audiences what they wanted, we kind of went out with this message of, we're creating a clearing space in the kind of cyber noise for you to tell us what you need from us. And we really honed in on, well, it's actually about making sure our collection was accessible and our librarians were accessible to help people navigate that in interesting ways and tell those stories that were unique to us. So trying not to compete with what was going on and talk directly to our audience.
Another question that's come in live over the Q&A. Somebody says, I'm shy about doing regular videos from my office on COVID. I don't have makeup on, don't have my hair done. Is that a problem? Or I would imagine that there is something very personal and very real about kind of whether it's somebody's headset not working in a situation or the presentation from the home office.
I absolutely think that is correct. And I feel like there's a real charm and almost this kind of one-on-one intimate experience you feel like you're having when we're all kind of sitting in our lounge room, or you see, the kids kind of pop up or the dog pop up. And it kind of just makes me think back to BBC Dad. I don't know if anybody remembers that video. Kind of he was, doing what we're all doing now, where his kids are kind of storming in and, he's doing it on international news. But I think I feel like there's such generosity amongst audiences and, with people that are doing, especially live streams, I feel that there is an intimacy about that as well that's really adding value to the experience. So don't be shy, just try it. We're all nervous, put it out there, and I think you'll find audiences are quite responsive and generous and will tell you again what they need as well.
Great. We're going to run 5 minutes overtime just to make up for the technical difficulties earlier. And another question, Nerida, in terms of challenges and successes that State Library Victoria has had in engaging and encouraging audiences who may not have been particularly digitally savvy or tech savvy before.
Yeah, look, I think that's really interesting. And, that was an issue for us internally as well. We've got a really wide-ranging group of people that work for the State Library, and particularly looking at our librarians sitting in front of a computer and recording themselves talking about it. It's a totally pushing the comfort zone, and they've done an extraordinary job to do that. Some of our colleagues didn't actually have any technology at home, and how we've worked with them to do that. I think we've all been on a learning curve together. I think, to be honest, I'd never even heard of Zoom before COVID. And I think that what we're finding is people are supporting each other, are developing those skills. I think for us, it is a really challenging thing how you create access for people when there is a digital disconnect there and a digital divide. And that's why having things like, people can still call the library and where, there's a recorded message and our librarians are coming back. People can still email the library and they're responding to communications in that way. But I think, again, audiences have shifted and, we've kind of all been forced to develop our skills in this area. And again, people are quite generous in building that up.
Now, communications can't be perfect at this time. Have you outsourced communications at all? And if so, how have you been agile in collaborating?
I missed the start of that. You broke up a little bit, Richard.
In terms of accepting that communications may not be perfect, have you outsourced any of those at this period? And tell us about the collaboration if that was the case.
Well, we're quite fortunate to have I've got a pretty good team, internally. And so we haven't had to outsource the work we've done in the comms space or in the programming space. Although we have engaged, from a programming perspective, we've engaged some, key talent that's helped really develop some of those. So Astrid Edwards, for example, you may know, who's been hosting our afternoon tea and talks with authors, and that's been a great collaboration, and she's a great friend of the library. Ty Snape is somebody else we've been developing programs with, and so really aligning with that great talent we had relationships with before, but how have we been adapting and working with them in a COVID environment. And I think we have moved very quickly, and I think internally, the collaboration internally has probably been quite challenging in a working from home environment, because there are reasonable sized teams and a lot of content being produced, and so working together across all the new platforms we were using. We introduced Microsoft Teams during COVID and things like that. So navigating all of that has been challenging, and I think managing expectations around timelines and things, because we've been doing that in an incredibly rapid environment. But equally, I know other organisations and smaller organisations have outsourced things like, technology to be able to deliver some of the live streamed programs. And I know that was talked about last week on this session. So I think it's about knowing where the strengths are and the opportunities, and collaborating where it makes sense.
Thinking about the future, how do you think COVID-19 has changed communications, and how will you adapt to those changes in the future?
I think people's expectations have shifted a little bit. I don't know that the frequency that we're communicating now will continue at that same frequency as we start to come out of lockdown, but I think that'll depend on audiences, and we'll ask more questions to help inform that. But I think, again, there's this expectation that we have this more intimate, personalised experience, because we have been, putting that out there. We have been taking videos on our iPhones and sharing that content, and there's a bit more, real-time nature to some of the stuff that we're doing. So I think that there's some real benefits to that. And I think some of the, the access the increased access, not just in terms of to our collections, but the reach across, people from regional areas and people who might have access issues or be living with a disability. Those things I think COVID has really shifted, changed the game for them and created real opportunities. So those are the benefits that we will make sure we're continuing to build into what we deliver.
And as a last question, have you employed new team members who can specifically work with the digital platforms of Zoom and create new content for the State Library's website at the moment? And if you have, what kind of skills do those people need?
Well, we have actually been recruiting, and we were actually already recruiting before COVID hit, but we have increased the number of roles that we've recruited to be able to support the output of work that we're producing. We've got new producers in our programming team, and absolutely thinking about their skills in a digital program production sense versus a traditional on-site experience has been a factor in that. And we're also in the process of actually recruiting some more technical operations staff. So, we've got an amazing colleague, Richie, who's kind of our go-to guru when it comes to our live stream events and things. And he traditionally was working with our commercial clients. The library is a space where you can hire venues. Obviously, that's not happening at the moment. And so Richie's absolutely been supporting the program delivery as we've been going through. But he's one person, so we're building the skills in that space. So things like, putting Zoom on speaker view and having, managing that chat function and changing the screens that people are seeing. So it's feeling like more a smoother kind of real-time edit of a program, as opposed to kind of just one head talking. So he's been amazing, and we need to build that capability and bring in more of those skills. The other skills we've been bringing in is, again, more content producers for our website. And it's copywriting skills. It's knowing how to, the key message you want to drive. Our social media team, we've got an extraordinary social media coordinator, but she's one person as well. So we're recruiting in there. So absolutely we're recruiting. And it's about, it's those technical skills, it's writing, it's knowing what the message should be.
Great. On that note, Nerida, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, not only for chatting with us today, but also jumping in as an emergency when my computer just decided not to cooperate. If you'd like to share today's discussion video, a full transcript, etc., will be available on ArtsHub by Friday. And next Wednesday at the same time, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, we'll be presenting our final webinar in this series, Mental Health Advisory. I hope you can join us then. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.